Hi, we're Quentin Cures Volumes. My name is James. Today is Sunday, so I'm going to do the Friday reading report, or Friday reads, or what I'm going to talk about what I've been reading for the past week. And I'll probably talk a bit about being a literary fanboy. Brian at the Bookish Texan, one of my favorite channels, one I've been watching for a few years now, he posted an interesting video last week about the problems of literary fanboydom. Something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was called. I'll put a link in my description so you can go and watch that. It's well worth your time and a bit of thought, and I'll give you some of my thoughts. First, I want to say I'm almost done with Marie Antoinette by Antonia Fraser, a fantastic biography. Where I am, she's still alive, but not long for this world, I think. I'll probably finish that tonight. Don't tell me how it ends, guys. I believe this book, Antonia Fraser's Marie Antoinette: The Journey, was the main source for the Sofia Coppola film of Marie Antoinette that came out probably 10 years ago, 12 years, whatever. It came out a while ago. Marie Antoinette, someone that you may think you know something about, but is a lot more complex than her caricature as an airheaded aristocrat, completely out of touch. So let's see what else. I am about halfway through Blood Done Sign My Name, a memoir of growing up in Oxford, North Carolina. This is a town kind of in the northeastern part of the state, tobacco country. It was written by Timothy B. Tyson, who became a professor of African American studies at a number of different places. Here it says he was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but I think he also taught at Duke for a while. Anyway, he grew up as the son of a Methodist minister in Oxford, and during the civil rights struggles of the 60s and into the 1970s. His father was for the time, a liberal who was in favor of integration and civil rights. Many of the other whites in town, as you might imagine, were opposed, and there are lots of very tense scenes of Timothy Tyson observing his father being confronted by parishioners who didn't like some of the stances he was taking, some of the things he was doing, such as, for example, having a memorial service for Dr. Martin Luther King after Dr. King was assassinated in 1968. The father had an integrated kind of commemorative service, and many of the older white parishioners were opposed to that, but it happened. And then it kind of centers around this central event in 1970 in which a black man is murdered in the street by several white men, and it seems that they may be about to get off without even being arrested or charged with anything, and this leads to riots, unrest, several tobacco warehouses being burned down. Haven't gotten to that part yet, but the tension is building. So that is halfway through Blood Doesn't Sign My Name by Timothy B. Tyson. A really good read. Also, kind of by way of telling these stories, a history of the civil rights movement, in particular as it relates to North Carolina, which, if you know about the Woolworth sit-ins that happened in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960, and but then kind of the focus for a lot of shorter histories of the civil rights movement, it moves to further south to Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, but North Carolina was definitely an important place in that history, and unfortunately also an important place for resistance to the civil rights movement. It was one of the major centers of KKK activity and lynchings and all kinds of horrible things like that. So that is that book. Then I have started, I'm 3 chapters into Bleak House by Charles Dickens. And, 3 chapters is not a lot of Bleak House. This is a very long book. I will be counting this as a mammoth for March of the Mammoths, which is in the month of March, we read mammoth books on Booktube. So this is also the final volume from my experience of reading through Steve Donohue's Western Canon Starter Kit. So I'm looking forward to wrapping that up and giving you my thoughts on that experience. I'm a little bit of a way into Within a Budding Grove, Volume 2 of In Search of Lost Time. I will probably put this on hold while I read Bleak House and then return to it later in March. So that's where we are right now. And so Brian, the Bookish Texan, who has a great channel, and if you don't watch him, you should, because he's very thoughtful, does some good reviews, occasionally travels somewhere. Booktube people aren't supposed to go anywhere, you just stay in your room. But anyway, he does that sometimes. And he's got a great channel. So he posted this video about being a literary fanboy, and he talked about his own experience, which is documented in the earlier videos on his channel, of him being a big fan of Ernest Hemingway, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and William Faulkner. And he relates how he thought that these 3 writers were probably the best that had ever been, and the best, and that they would never be surpassed. He says also that he finds people on YouTube, particularly young men, who exhibit similar attitudes towards Cormac McCarthy, Haruki Murakami, and David Foster Wallace. Probably so. I've seen some of this myself. I don't know how much of a problem it is. Brian himself, he thought this, and he went on, started doing Booktube, got exposed to other writers, revised his opinion. When I was young, I also loved Ernest Hemingway, also F. Scott Fitzgerald. Just the way that these guys wrote, I thought was kind of magical, especially Fitzgerald. You can probably remember reading The Great Gatsby for the first time, if you have read it for the first time, and kind of the beauty and brilliance of this novel, and how he could sort of give you this complex experience in a very compact and beautiful way, and just sort of convey it to you. I would also say I had an infatuation for Hunter S. Thompson. This is a really classic a fanboy kind of writer. When I read his book Hell's Angels, which was not even, peak Thompson, Gonzo Thompson, but the Hell's Angels, reading that book, it was like, being electrified. His use of language was amazing. It was like a trip. It was a whole thing. And then I read, more of him. And, this was in the late 1980s when, so most people then didn't know a lot about, Muskie or George Wallace or these other, dead politicians. But it was fun to learn about that stuff. The 1972 presidential campaign. It was a bit of a slog in parts because, who cared at that point? But still a lot of fun to read. And look, that guy is not a good influence. The way he ended up his life, you don't want to end up like that. But being enthusiastic, having something in literature that you are enthusiastic about, that you love, is a good thing more often than not. And even if it is irrational, even if you feel like your favorite writer is a god among writers and will never be surpassed, look, that's okay. That's a young person's experience, a young person's point of view and belief. And eventually, as long as you're into something, you're gonna keep reading. And once you've read, I don't know, The Curse of Lono and the Gonzo Papers, Volume 8, the Gonzoist paper, you run out of all your Hunter Thompson, or you've finally read The Last Ding Dong of Doom by Faulkner, and you turn to something else, and you learn more, and you discover other writers have other things to offer. Maybe you go from Faulkner to Zadie Smith. Maybe that's an unlikely one. Maybe Faulkner to Alice Walker. That's probably unlikely. Okay, so you go from Faulkner to J.D. Robb. No, that's probably not. You go from Faulkner to someone else. Probably Cormac McCarthy is going to be. And, then you get into Cormac McCarthy for a while. And that's okay too. Even if you go from one, uh, toxic male two-fisted brawler of a writer to another, you're reading stuff, and that is what we're here for. We're here for people reading books and loving books and feeling strongly about them. And I don't know, I feel like sometimes, for young men especially, the things that they're into get kind of tarred by being young men's things, and that there's something wrong with that, with the implication being that it's wrong because it's male. It's wrong because it's bro lit or something like that. And if we want people to read, we want young men to read, and we want young men to read, we shouldn't make it like there's a problem about what they're reading. Because to be honest, most young men not reading anything. And the ones who are not reading fiction. And those who are reading fiction, they're not reading classic literature. Or experimental stuff like David Foster Wallace. So give them a break, let them like what they like, and be there for them when they're looking for something else. Give them a good recommendation. Oh, you like David Foster Wallace? How about some Pynchon? How about some Don DeLillo? That's a good one for someone who likes David Foster Wallace. Read some Don DeLillo. Read some Thomas Pynchon. See what you think of that. There's other writers, some of them still producing, who are doing good work that you'll probably like. Anyway, that's my thought. Let me know what you think, all my fellow fanboys and fangirls. Have a good afternoon. Thanks for watching. Bye.